Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous podcast, hosted by Bruce Hutcheon, and episode number 147.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutcheon.
Michael Hecht joins us today. Michael is a leasing agent and land management specialist for CS Outdoors. He grew up on a predominantly cash crop and cattle farm in Saginaw Bay area of Michigan, where his father instilled his passion from the outdoors and his love for the land, along with his never quit work ethic. Still to this day, I credit most of my success to the way I was brought up. Although my love for the land differs from my father, I still share the same passion for the outdoors. In 2006, I attended the Winterhawk Outfitters Guide School in the Flat Top area of Colorado, where I successfully completed the course and sharpened my skills as a hunter. Although I do not guide, I use the knowledge I gain in the classes for all my hunts. In leasing Hayden's a hunter, fisherman, outdoors woman, and a shadow blade camel princess. She loves hunting ducks in Georgia. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, Bruce Hutcheon. And we're heading out east today and heading to Michigan. And we're going to talk with Michael Hecht, leasing agent and land management specialist for CS Outdoors. And as well as he's just starting to get into videoing his own hunt. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Bruce? Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm really excited to have you because Mr. McIntyre was on a couple months ago, and he spoke highly of his whole team there at CS Outdoors. So without further ado, let's talk about CS Outdoors and what you do for them.
CS Outdoors is a leasing agency. They're solely based out of Missouri. And I have to correct you a little bit.
Okay.
I'm originally from Michigan. That's where I was born and raised, and that's kind of where all my family's from. But I actually moved to Iowa back in 2012. So that's where I currently reside.
Hey, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that.
Not a problem. I'm actually a leasing agent for CS Outdoors, and all my properties are in southern Iowa, pretty much the southern two-tier counties in Iowa.
And so what is CS Outdoors? What do you do? Are you leasing for hunting? Are you leasing for farming or habitat improvement for whitetails? Tell me more about it.
We offer a couple different options. As far as our leases go, our leases are strictly for hunting. We haven't dabbled into the agriculture side of things. So we offer yearly leases as well as what we call an elite hunt, which is something completely different that you don't see it on the market at all. It's a 5-day unguided hunt. Very low pressure. Last year we ran 6 people on all our properties. We wanted to keep it kind of a relatively small, unpressured atmosphere, where this year we've kind of doubled up our size of our leases and our properties, and we're able to run 12 guys through this year. It's compared to an outfitter where they kind of run, they'll run 20 or 30 guys through a piece of property, where we only run a handful through. And you might have one guy on a farm all year, and we encourage. We don't have any antler point restrictions or minimum size. We just encourage you hunt for the most mature animal on that piece of property, and we run our trail cameras, and we have a pretty good understanding of what deer are out there and what deer we want harvested.
How many acres do you have under lease there in Iowa or Missouri, throughout the Midwest?
In Missouri, I'm not 100% sure. The owner, Corey Smith, he handles all the Missouri properties. I handle the Iowa properties. And right now in Iowa, for this year, as it sits right now, we have right around 15 or 1,600 acres up for lease. Not to say that we're not going to add a few more farms this year. I just haven't had the time to get out and knock on some doors like I was hoping. My daughter was just born last Thursday, so.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of a life-changing experience there, and luckily I have an understanding wife that, she understands that this is part of my job, and, being, wanting to have a career in the outdoor industry, it takes a little bit of sacrifice. So, but she's very understanding of it.
Now, do you have another job besides this job with CS Outdoors?
I do. I'm an over-the-road field mechanic for a utility contractor.
So you are a busy guy then.
I am. I could spend 1 or 2 nights a week away from home, and then get home on the weekends. During hunting season, it's every weekend I'm gone, and during this time of year, I used to just take the time off, and it was family time, but now working with CS, I have to be gone a little bit more. You just gotta, you can't secure any ground sitting on the couch, just like you can't kill any deer sitting on the couch.
Agreed. Now, let's talk about, we got a lot of listeners from Iowa, and if a guy or a gal's in Iowa and saying, gee, I'd like to find out more about this, how do they reach you?
Sure. They can, there's 2 ways, if there's general interest, or you just want to know more about our leases or more about an elite hunt, or we actually offer consultations for land management, where we can come out and say, if you have 300 acres, we decide how much food you should have on your property by browse pressure. Right now is a great time to go out there, and you can look at your cedars and your edible trees and see how far they're nipped up. If you got every tree that's nipped up about 6 foot, 5 to 6 foot off the ground, you got to have some food on your property. You got a lot of natural browse pressure. It's nice to have some added food on your property. So we offer that consultation as well. But the website is www.cshunts.com, and that'll give you some general information as well as Corey's contact information.
Well, great. Thank you for that. So I have hunted Iowa, and every time I hunt, I have to get a permit. I have to get, a tag through the drawer because I'm not a resident. So for non-residents, how would they use your service?
Well, the best thing to do is you got to start planning. In Iowa, unfortunately, they do on their draw system. If you have, say you have 2 points and you don't apply for 2 years, something happens, and say you forget, or you think, well, I got 2 points, I'll wait a couple of years to put in. After 2 years, you're back down to 0. You lose your points. So number one step is, when somebody calls and they say, hey, we're looking to archery hunt, and I have to tell them, you're looking at a minimum of 4 years, maybe 3. You got a real small percentage, but 4 or 5 years is a realistic goal. Obviously, we don't plan on going anywhere in 5 years. We don't ask for a deposit for somebody who's booking a hunt for 5 years, but we just tell them, hey, you got to stay in contact with us. Call whenever you need to. If you want to see some trail cam pictures, we can email you some trail cam pictures from the year on our leases. But you have to get those points. And gun hunters, it's a little bit easier. Down in Zone 5, Zone 6, you got about a 50% chance of getting it your first year. And that's shotgun and muzzleloader. It depends on which one you pick. But a 53% chance, it's a pretty good odds to draw. getting your tag your first year.
Now, what zones do you handle or do you have properties in Iowa?
Right now, it's Zone 5 strictly. That's where I hunt. That's kind of my home base is in Zone 5. So I've kind of branched out a little bit from Zone 5, or just around Zone 5 there. Eventually, I'd like to have some Zone 6 ground, and even some Zone 7 if possible. But I mean, it's just going to take time and getting to know the right people and building that reputation with our landowners. We try and put our landowners' needs first before hunters and clients. We really, like I say, we're land managers first, and we're leasing agents second. I care more about making sure the deer are healthy on the farm and the deer are taken care of than making any money in the deal.
Now, 5 and 6, help me out. I think they're south of Interstate 80. Is that correct?
Correct. They are south. Zone 5 is south central. Zone 6 would be southeast.
So 6 along the Mississippi?
I believe it borders, either that or Zone 7 borders. I'd have to look at a map, but I think
sure.
It's 5, 6, and 7, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that, but...
Great. And if there's any landowners from Iowa that are also hunters, let's just go and what are 5 things that you do when you come in and do the consulting? You talked a little about the forage and the browsing and, if they're over browsing, but what are a couple other things that you do for the landowner?
We can set up, we offer, it's pretty much, it's up to the landowner. We can have, we'll do anything that they need us to do. If they want a turnkey operation, trail cameras out, tree stands hung, food plots installed, monitoring of the trail cameras, that's all that we will do pretty much anything that they require us to do. Or as little, if they just want us to come out there and look and say, where would you guys put your tree stands at, then we'll study some topo maps and we'll study aerial pictures and we'll try and figure that stuff out to our, best of our knowledge and get them set up.
And what's a range of feet? Not specifically, do you have a fee per acre or what is that range?
I want to say for the consulting, I want to say it starts around, it's either 14 or 15 an acre, I believe it is.
All right. Well, thanks for that. And just let's jump into, in 2006, you came out to Colorado, went to Winterhawk Outfitters. How has that helped you be a better whitetail hunter and be able to really take care of the clients of CS Outdoors?
Yes, in 2006, I attended the Winterhawk Outfitters Guide School. That was, I grew up on a farm. I had a summer off, and I said, I want to get out. And at that point, I was kind of like, I do love the outdoors. I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be involved in the outdoors, but I really wasn't sure if I wanted to farm. I got my love for the land from my dad, and it differs a little bit from his. But I applied for the school. I got accepted. I went out there and completed the course, and it's some of the most beautiful country. I mean, when you can go to bed for a whole summer and you can go to sleep with bulls bugling and wake up in the morning with bulls bugling. I mean, it's just it's an amazing experience.
Yes, it is, and the flat tops have the largest herd of elk in the United States, I believe in North America, and it's flat tops wilderness is just pristine, and it's tough to get in, and you got to you can hike or you can ride horses, but it's some beautiful country, and I've been fortunate to hunt up there a number of times, and it's just a wonderful place, and it looks like it's coming right out of Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation Outdoor Life. It's quintessential elk country. So I'm glad you had that experience. Let's spin it around. Let's not talk about your three things about whitetails. And the first thing you shared in the warm-up, Michael, was age class. So let's explain that to our listeners, and let's expand that to the importance of looking at age class of whitetails.
Yes. When I touched on it a little bit earlier, with CS Outdoors, we don't have a minimum score or a minimum point structure or anything like that set in place. We encourage the harvest of the most mature animal on the farm. Now, if that means you got to pass a 3-year-old 150-inch deer, chances are, if we have that deer on trail camera, we're probably going to show you some pictures of them, and we're gonna install some fines on them. And that carries over to my personal farms. There comes a point when you say, man, I can shoot a 146-inch deer, and that's a great deer. I mean, if that's the biggest deer on your farm, the oldest deer on your farm, that's a great deer to take. 146-inch deer, who's not going to shoot that? But if you have older deer, and you got to pass the great deer or the good deer to get the great deer. You kind of know what I'm saying on that part. That's just something that I try, and I'm gonna really be a stickler about this year is going strictly for not even picking up my bow for those 3-year-old or 3.5-year-old 140-inch deer, and just strictly hunting a mature deer. I mean, it's something when you can. I experienced it this year with my father. If you can harvest the most mature deer on your farm, that's a trophy. I mean, that's something to be really proud about. You just outsmarted the deer that's eluded everybody else for 6 years, 5 years, 7 years. In my dad's case, that's something to be really proud about.
How did you get to where you decided, I'm going to go for the top end of the age class on this piece of property? Just go take us through the process of getting to you to get to that point.
Well, it actually started it'd be the farm that I killed my buck on this year. I've hunted the farm. This will be my 3rd year now. And there's a deer. He's kind of a screwy rack. He's a beautiful 6 on one side. The other side, he's got one really long main beam, and then he has 2 brow tines. And then this year he grew an extra point, middle of the beam. Now, when I talked to a landowner, they said, yeah, that deer's been there for 2 years already. He's been like that ever since we've seen him. So I got to thinking, and I've had some encounters with the deer. I ended up actually, not last year, but the year before, I had him twice at 20 yards, and I passed him. And I wasn't. I probably should have shot him. He's a great buck with a lot of character, but that side kind of held me back. And both times he was chasing a doe, so I never got a good glimpse at him, just in kind of a natural habitat. With the more I watched the trail cam pictures, I noticed that this deer, he cored. That farm then where I was hunting, that was his core area. There was not a lot of other deer within that core area. He was the oldest, most dominant deer in that area. So I figure he has he's going to have about 6 years of history this year. So going solely off the history, that in itself made that deer this year my number one deer. if he made it through this year, he'll be guessing roughly minimum 7 years. That's going to be a great deer to be able to harvest at a 7-year-old, you know.
How big is his core area? How many acres?
You know, it shrunk quite a bit this year. Last year, it was probably, the farm itself is about 260, about 30 acres of woods, and it's a long creek draw, and it leads into about a 60-acre chunk of woods that's privately owned by a different person. But the majority of my deer bed there and use that creek draw for a travel corridor. But his core area this year shrunk to where the year before I was seeing him about 500 yards down the draw, and then this year he was locked down and he did not come onto our farm more than 40 or 50 yards to feed.
Why do you think that is?
I think it just kind of, well, for one, I noticed this year, this is the first year I've seen him before the rut came in where he wasn't chasing does. He's got a limp, a very, very distinct limp, and he's kind of got some, looks like maybe some muscle loss. He was either hit by a car or he was shot at one point in his front shoulder. But he's got a very distinct limp, and you know, I think he's old enough to where he probably does not want to fight. He probably doesn't have it in him anymore to fight and stick it out with some of the, you know, there's a lot of good 3-year-old deer on this farm, and a lot of them have bad intentions when it comes to other deer. So I think he just he stays to himself and you know, takes whatever does he can take at, you know, in that core area.
Now, listeners, you know, we just been listening for a couple of minutes about Mike's intimate knowledge, one, of where the deer lives, but two, his behaviors and his history. And that's pretty good stuff, Michael, because a lot of people just go out and hunt, but you're focusing, you're drilling down, you're understanding the deer, you know, his characteristics, and, you know, I would say, you know, you got a really good chance if you choose to take him out this year, because 7.5 years old is getting near the top of his lifetime.
Correct.
You know, his teeth are probably worn down pretty good, and you know, he's getting slower and slower, and sooner or later, you know, a very aggressive or dominant buck's going to come in and really, you know, want him to be out of there.
Correct, and that's kind of my main concern. I mean, that deer this year was number one on my hit list. I saw him 3 times. I gave up on all my other farms. I'm lucky enough I have about close to 6,000 acres in Wayne County, southern Iowa, that I can hunt. I gave up on all my other farms from October to November, and I sat in an observation stand about 500 yards away from this core area, knowing full well that I was not going to get a shot at a deer unless it was luck. I didn't have very good trail cam pictures down here, not a lot of activity, but I can see exactly where these deer come out. And I saw him probably 3 or 4 times, and by the time I had a tree stand, probably 15, 20 yards from the property line, right in kind of a corner, inside corner of a cut cornfield. And the deer traffic there was phenomenal all year. I watched it from that stand, and you know, I seen 5 or 6 different deer that probably would have went around 140 to 160 inches come out and use that, you know, browse in that cut cornfield. So as the season progressed, they started getting closer and closer, but it was more right at light, or, you know, that last light, that they would be within shooting distance, of course. Possibly could have got a shot with a bow, but the camera would have been, you know, it wouldn't have made film. So I think November 2nd, I ended up saying, you know what, it was 75 degrees. I had a week of vacation. I hunted that morning. It was November 2nd was a Monday. I hunted that morning, and I hunted a farm that I hadn't hunted all year. Didn't see a deer. It was kind of down. I had a lot of high hopes for this spot, and I rattled, called. There was just nothing there. So I packed out the stand, all the camera equipment. By the time I got to the truck, I had some lunch and drove to the farm where I knew this deer lived. I pulled in the drive, and, you know, I called some friends of mine, and I, you know, chatting with them, and I said, you know, I don't even know if I'm going to hunt tonight. It's 75 degrees, you know. Is it worth going back there and potentially blowing one of these deer out of there? So you know, they all said, you might as well hunt. So I figured, you know, I'm on vacation. I'm away from my family. I need to be back there. So I made the mile walk back and stopped, and I checked one of my trail cameras that was set over a WinPro mock scrape. I swapped the card out, never even checked it. Got to the tree stand. It was 2:45 when I got up in the tree stand. Had the camera set up, just kind of started getting everything settled in, and I heard something. It didn't register right away. I thought it was a squirrel, and all of a sudden I hear branches breaking, and I kind of look up into the field or into the woods a little bit, and I can see the treetop shaking back and forth, and I'm thinking, this is a good deer. So I grabbed the horns, rattling horn, and grabbed the grunt, and there was a limb in front of me, and I raked it a couple times and was pretty aggressive with it, broke some branches, and grunted twice, turned around, I hung everything up. By the time I had turned, I seen the deer come across the fence at 10 yards, straight in front of me. Starts pawing the ground, and I instantly knew which deer it was, and it ended up being a deer I called the late back 10, which was, you know, I've been hunting that horn for 3 years. I had trail cam pictures of him for 3 years, and I knew he was number 2 on my hit list. So, you know, I turn on the camera, and of course the camera arm's kind of behind me, and I start panning it across, and once it gets, you know, kind of over center there, it creaks. I didn't have my strap tied enough, and that deer looks up at me from 10 yards, and I'm thinking, well, you know, that was a good effort, but this deer's gone. And I just kind of stood there. Somehow I picked up my bow in between this, and I don't know how or when I did it, but had my bow in my other hand, and that deer, he just looked up, and I never moved. And the whole time I'm thinking, you know, if I had a Garmin Verb on right now, I think if somebody was watching the heart rate on this, they would probably think I'm having a heart attack here, because my pulse, you know, I could just feel everything, just like my heart was beating, I was breathing heavy. And then after what seemed like about forever, which only ended up being about 20 seconds, the deer turned broadside at 8 yards and started walking. I committed to my shot, drew back. I didn't know if it was on film. Drew back and ended up putting a great shot on the deer, and he only went about 75 yards, and I heard him crash, but ended up getting it all on film. I mean, it took a lot of patience for something like that to happen. You know, that was my biggest buck that I've ever harvested, so I was pretty happy with him.
Well, congrats, and this is amazing, folks, but we're at the point in time where you get about a minute to share shout-outs to sponsors, to people you work with, to friends, neighbors, family. So take about a minute, and then we'll call it a show because you've done a great job, Michael, sharing some awesome stories.
Well,
so the mic's yours.
Thanks. I have to say thank you to HHA Sport Optics. I'm a staffer for them, and definitely a thank you to my wife for being so understanding. Thanks to Corey Smith at CS Outdoors and everybody at CS Outdoors. You guys are all great to work with. Can't say enough about working with everybody involved with that staff.
Well, Michael, I can't wait to see if you get that 7.5-year-old when we talk next year, and I'd like to sure follow up on that. And on behalf of Whitetail Rendezvous Nation, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient.
If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.